This is the second of our videos on integumentary system. On this video lecture, we will be looking at the parts that make up this system, looking into a bit more detail of the layers that you were introduced earlier, and we will also discuss what gives the skin its color. So, let's get started. Integumentary system consists of the skin, which is the main focus of our chapter, as well as some accessory structures. These include hair, nails, and different glands. In particular, we will look at sweat glands and oil-producing sebaceous glands. Now, here is a busy-looking slide. Let's go through it step by step. As you learned in the last activity, there are distinct regions of the skin. And these do show up on the microscopic cross-section of the skin as you see here. So we have epidermis, which is the most superficial region. As we noted, it is made of epithelial tissue and is avascular. Therefore, the cells here, which are stratified squamous epithelia, are dead. And you shed a lot of these dead cells all the time, but at the same time from the bottom of this epidermal layer, new ones are produced. Also note that these cells are highly keratinized. Keratin is a fibrous protein that serves a twofold function. It allows cells to adhere to each other, as well as to form a harder protective layer of the skin. You can consider it as protecting epithelial cells of epidermis from damage and stress. Being insoluble to water and organic solvents, keratin also serves another kind of protective function than just mechanical. It gives the skin its chemical stability and protection too. It can be further subdivided into 5 distinct layers. Here, this list provides them starting from the most deepest and moving towards the more superficial. So we have various strata. Stratum basale, spinosum, granulosum, lucidum, which may or may not be present depending on the thickness of the skin, and stratum corneum. Many of my students have came up with the most creative mnemonics for this. Come up with your own one, but I recall one recent one having been barmaid served granny liquor constantly. Well, here you can actually see these strata of epidermis on a real microscopic sample on the left and on a diagram on the right. I always find that the students get genuinely surprised to realize that these structures do exist and that I do not just make them up. Then we have dermis. This layer is mostly fibrous connective tissue, in particular collagen and elastic fibers. Therefore, it is very strong and flexible in structure, which is why this layer is usually used to make leather from other animals. We also find that dermis is vascular in nature. This means that it has a lot of blood supply. And now we have living cells here as they are getting this blood supply. In addition, dermis contains many glands and nerves, as well as lymphatic vessels too. Dermis is made of 2 layers. These are the thin papillary layer, which is more superficial, and thicker reticular layer, which forms the most of the thickness of the dermal layer. Here you can see these two in a real cross-section of a skin. Notice how nicely it has been stained to show different parts. Here on this microscopic image, which is on a magnification of 100 times, we can note how the structure of the tissue in these 2 layers of dermis differs quite a bit. Okay, let's look at the last layer that I want to point out from this diagram. It is hypodermis. Hypodermis is sometimes called as the subcutaneous layer, so please do not get confused if you run into that term somewhere. We find that, strictly speaking, it really is not a part of the skin, but as it shares some of the functions, it is usually included in this discussion. Hypodermis is mostly made of adipose fat tissue and may include or is anchored to muscle. It works as a great insulation and shock absorption, protecting the structures beneath it. So we have covered the 3 layers on this diagram, and we will return to other important structures a bit later. At this point though, I want to discuss with you about what gives the color of the skin. Well, this picture always reminds me of the first term that I want to introduce to you regarding it. Melanin is the pigment that is responsible for the darkening of the skin as you get more sunlight. To be precise, it is an umbrella term for a group of pigments produced by melanocyte cells that give colors from yellow to brownish to black, depending on how much melanin is present. How about if one was an albino? Well, in that case, that individual would have no melanin present. Let's look at a few others. In addition, we have substances known as keratin. They give orange or reddish color and are found in carrots and many other plant structures. In fact, if you do eat a lot of carrot in your diet, your skin is likely to get a bit more orange in color. And then I wanted to discuss how the composition of blood plays an important role in the color of your skin. Anyone ever blushed? Yes, that is actually known as erythema. And in this condition, the blood rushes close to the surface of your skin due to the dilation of the blood vessels and capillaries on this region. This may be due to, for example, an emotional response such as an embarrassment. This can also go the other way. Let's look at a situation where you have very little oxygen in your blood bound to the hemoglobin. This could lead especially to the skin on the lips and fingertips turning more bluish in color. Or if you really go pale, the color fading from your skin, this could be due to a physiological response. Say, have you ever heard a saying that someone went white as a bed sheet due to the fear? Or be indicative of a low blood pressure or a person being anemic, for example. And then we have some people who are yellow in color. This is often indicative of the liver or kidney failure, for example. What gives this yellow color? Well, if kidneys in particular are not functioning, the uric acid or other components that are in the urine do not get filtered away from the blood. And therefore, the individual has high concentration of these substances in their blood, and this is shown through the skin. It is especially the eye whites where we can often see this very obviously in the people with this condition. You can, of course, have other conditions as well. I wanted to discuss in particular bruises. These are bleeding that is happening underneath the skin, and we see this as changes in the color through the skin. There are a few more structures that I wanted to highlight from this diagram at this stage. Oil glands are often associated at the base of the hair root, typically opening to the hair follicles. Why would you want oil to your hair? Well, it keeps the hair from becoming brittle and softens and moistens the hair, and it also has a role in killing the bacteria. Well, the other structure that I wanted to highlight here is the sweat glands. Their function is, of course, to make the sweat. Here's an interesting fact. Have you ever walked past someone who smells sweaty? Probably yes. Well, actually, it is not the smell of the sweat that you are getting this scent from. This is as pure sweat does not smell at all. Instead, it is the bacteria that work in this sweaty area that are giving off this scent. How about that? This is where we will wrap up this talk, and in our next video we will be wrapping up the highlight of this chapter by looking at hair and nails. As well, we will discuss some clinical relevance of the things that we have learned about. I will see you then.